The stars shimmered cold and distant beyond the reinforced viewports of Solace Dawn, the lead ship of Earth's most advanced humanitarian convoy. Captain Mira Celine stood at the helm, arms folded behind her back, eyes fixed on the infinite dark ahead. She had overseen countless missions, each more delicate than the last, but something about this one clawed at her instincts. Convoy Alpha 9 was not a war fleet. It bore no weapons beyond minimal escort-class defenses. It was hope on engines, medical ships, supply freighters, and evacuation barges gliding toward the disaster-stricken mining world of Garan 3. 20,000 lives were buried beneath its irradiated crust, and Earth had answered with speed and compassion. Mira had assembled a fleet in under 48 hours. Bureaucracy bowed to necessity. That was her gift. Trajectory locked, came the voice of Ensign Rico from the NAV console. ETA, 6 hours, assuming no anomalies in the drift fields. Assume they'll appear anyway, Mira replied, half-turning. Set secondary routes. I want maneuvering options. Rico nodded without protest. The bridge crew had long learned not to mistake Myra's caution for paranoia. She'd seen things. During the Andarian crisis, the Vesk surge. She'd once piloted a freighter through a black hole's accretion halo to save a lost medical team. The galaxy was wide, and peace was a fragile mask. Still, even she hadn't expected silence this loud. There had been no response from Garan, 3 since their initial distress ping. The rescue protocol should have triggered a beacon, but the planet's signal had gone dark. No debris field, no reply. The only certainty was the suffering still below its crust. As the hours passed, Mira checked each system twice. She spoke with her med commander, Dr. Ilwin Park, who confirmed triage was ready the moment boots hit the ground. Supply drones were calibrated. Docks were cleared. Then, without warning, the stars blinked. Not all of them. Just 3 points, impossibly synchronized, vanishing from view on the outer sensor net. Before Mira could speak, alarm screamed. Unidentified objects, Vector 049. Rico's voice cracked as his hands flew across the interface. Emerging from null space, no IFF, no response to hails. The ships materialized like knives from shadow. Angular, black-hulled, devoid of insignia. They moved in silence and precision, forming a pincer around the convoy's perimeter. There was no warning, no ultimatum, no signal, just light. They opened fire. Myra's voice cut through the chaos. Evasive pattern Beta 2. Shield the freighters. Activate ECM. Space erupted in searing bursts of plasma. 2 escort corvettes crumpled under the first volley, their fragments scattering like embers. Mira gripped the edge of the command rail, shouting over the din. Where the hell is the response net? Who are they? No data. Rico's voice trembled. We're being jammed. Medical ship Andari Hope took a direct hit to its engines, spiraling into a control fall. Myra's stomach sank as the ship blinked off the tactical grid. Lost, presumed gone. She barked new orders. Fighters launched from the Solace Dawn's belly, but they were scouts at best, not built for war. Not this war. On the lower decks, civilians and med teams huddled under emergency bulkheads, some still unaware they were under siege. In Myra's earpiece, Dr. Park's calm voice described triage overflow. The wounded were already being counted. Message boost failed, Rico reported, eyes wide with helplessness. They're severing our data cores. Mira made a choice. Transfer full sensor logs to my secure channel. Prep an escape trajectory for the dawn. We have to get someone out. You're not going to try. No. She glanced toward the dying convoy. We're not winning this. But someone will know. The Solace Dawn spun into a desperate maneuver, its thrusters burning white as it broke formation. The attackers gave chase, 3 of their crafts peeling away. Myra's crew rerouted power from non-essential systems, diverting every ounce of thrust into the full drive. The outer decks vibrated with the strain. As they cleared the outer ring of the convoy, Mira looked back. Flames danced in the dark. Freighters cracked apart. She could hear nothing. Space denied that, but she imagined the screams. She locked her jaw. Punch it, she said. Light folded in on itself. The Solace Dawn vanished. When they emerged, weeks away in a matter of seconds, Mira stood alone on the bridge. The crew worked in silence. No one spoke. No one needed to. They had seen what she saw. Hours later, Mira sat in her quarters, the tactical log replaying in stuttering holograms. She watched as the Andari Hope was struck again, this time its medbay visibly exploding into vacuum. She paused the feed. She could have watched the part where Park's voice went silent. By the time they reached Earth orbit, the data package had already been decrypted and broadcast. The footage stormed across every network, a viral wound laid bare. People stopped what they were doing. Cities stilled. Families watched together. In living rooms, on street screens, in classrooms. They saw freighters carrying food and medicine torn to pieces. They saw a fleet meant to save lives reduced to ruin. It wasn't just the attack, it was the intent. The utter absence of mercy. In the Unified Council's war chamber, high above the Pacific Core, representatives gathered in person for the first time in decades. The holographic dome displayed the wreckage in loop. Mira, still in her scorched captain's coat, stood alone at the podium. There was no provocation, she said. No warning. No declaration. They fired on unarmed ships, on doctors, on children. The chamber was silent. A diplomat from Mars' outer station whispered, "This could be a misunderstanding. We haven't confirmed." "They targeted our medics first." Mira snapped. "That's not a mistake. That's a message." And Earth heard it. The vote passed in under an hour. Unanimous. No dissent. Earth had tried peace. But peace had a price, and someone had decided not to pay it. By dawn, the interstellar fleet was mobilized. Dreadnoughts lifted from Europa's dry docks. Shipyards roared to life on the lunar ridge. The sun rose over a world no longer patient, because someone, somewhere, had believed they could kill without consequence. They were wrong, and Earth was coming. Would you like to continue with Section 2 next? The chamber lights dimmed as the final vote was tallied, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the orbital platform's energy core. Mira stood rigid on the far end of the dais, her eyes fixed on the central display. The holographic text rotated slowly, its message stark. War resolution pass, 203 votes 2-0. She didn't flinch. No relief. No triumph. Only the numb gravity of inevitability. Behind her, the council members murmured as they dispersed. Some were expressions of grim certainty. Others sheer disbelief at how quickly peace had shattered. Earth had spent a century cultivating neutrality in interstellar affairs. Now, within days of the Convoy Alpha 9 massacre, all that care for diplomacy had collapsed. Admiral Cale Rourke stepped forward, his heavy boots echoing across the steel floor. Mira turned as he approached. He was taller than she remembered, grizzled by age and years of hard command, his presence sharp enough to command a fleet without a word. "They didn't even ask who did it," Mira said quietly. "They didn't need to," Rourke replied. "They saw the dead." She studied him. Rourke had been pulled from retirement, voluntarily, the press claimed. Mira doubted he'd had much choice. He was Earth's most decorated fleet strategist, a relic of war in an age that had forgotten its weight. But now, war had returned, and with it, the tools once buried. "I want a seat in the command loop," she said. "I want to be there when we launch." "You're a rescue captain," Rourke replied. "This isn't a salvage op. It's a burn." "I watch my crew die," she snapped. "You want someone who's seen what they're capable of. I'm not asking." He studied her in silence, then gave a slow nod. "Debrief is in 6 hours. You'll report to Fleet Command at Lunar Base." As he turned to leave, Mira called after him. "What do we actually know about them?" "Not much," he said without looking back. "But we'll learn fast." 6 hours later, the room was colder. The Lunar Command Hall was buried beneath the regolith of Mare Tranquillitatis, far from the glare of media or political oversight. It had been mothballed for decades, designed for a war that was never supposed to happen. Now, screens flared back to life. Holograms flickered. Officers streamed in like blood returning to a long-dormant heart. Rourke stood at the center, a stone amidst the whirlwind. Around him, command staff poured over the limited data recovered from Myra's ship. The attackers were now identified under a singular designation, the Varn. No known homeworld, no language database, no prior interaction with Earth or its allies. Their tech bore traces of quantum encryption, suggesting a high level of sophistication. Yet they had attacked a rescue mission with no attempt at communication. "Are we certain this wasn't Splinter Group?" asked Colonel Draven, head of Fleet Intelligence. "Rogue cells can't be ruled out." "No," Rourke answered. "This was coordinated, timed, calculated. You don't ambush from null space unless you've mapped the lane weeks in advance." "And they waited until we were at our most exposed," Mira added. "Not just civilians, doctors, supplies. That wasn't strategy. That was theater." Draven frowned but said nothing. Across the table, Commander Lien VES, Director of Tactical Deployment, tapped through a display showing Earth's fleet status. Dozens of ships were already diverting from exploration routes and patrol stations. Construction of new cruisers had begun on orbital docks above Jupiter, while elite strike carriers were being recalled from the Centauri perimeter. "What's our objective?" Lien asked, turning to Rourke. "Retaliation or elimination?" Rourke didn't blink. "Both." Mira exhaled slowly. The word carried weight. Not justice. Not deterrence. Elimination. And still, no one in the room flinched. As the hours passed, the plan took shape. Earth's interstellar fleet, once a defensive structure, was restructured into a spearhead. The initial phase, code-named Operation Vengeance, would deploy 3 battle groups to the outer fringe, where Varn incursions had been tentatively mapped. Deep space drones confirmed ship signatures matching those from the convoy attack. The Varn were expanding. They were preparing for more. At the end of the briefing, Rourke dismissed the room but motioned for Mira to stay. She stood across from him, arms crossed. "You'll be commanding a recon detachment," he said. "We need boots on their fringe worlds. I want to know what they eat, what they worship, what they fear." "You still think this might be something we can reason with?" she asked. "I think understanding your enemy is how you destroy them." She hesitated. "And if there's a reason they attacked us?" Rourke's eyes met hers. "Then it better be good enough to bring back the dead." She had no response to that. The next 3 days moved like a rising tide. Military industries surged to full output. AI-controlled factories churned out railgun systems and shield arrays at record pace. Fleet Command conscripted thousands of former officers, including Myra's own surviving personnel. She found herself at the helm of the Argent Warden, a warship not built for mercy, surrounded by officers who looked to her as both victim and symbol. When she walked the decks of her new command, silence followed her. There were no whispered doubts, no casual chatter. The crew had seen the footage. They had seen the convoys burn. On the 5th day, as the fleet prepared to launch, Mira stood on the Warden's observation deck. Jupiter loomed massive beyond the glass, its red storm swirling like a living eye. Below, the dock lights blinked as carrier after carrier detached and moved into formation. She heard footsteps behind her. "You haven't slept?" Rico said, setting down a data slate beside her. He was thinner now, older by a decade, though it had only been a week. "We've received the final jump coordinates. We're ready." Mira didn't answer immediately. She watched as the fleet arranged itself into the layered phalanx formation that Rourke favored. It was elegant in a brutal way, a weapon wearing the skin of precision. "Do you think we'll find them?" she asked. Rico looked out at the stars. "They won't be found. They're daring us." She nodded. The message was clear. In silence, the fleet moved. Each ship vanished in pulses of folded light, streaking toward the edge of known space, toward the shadow the Varn had cast. Mira watched the final ship depart, her own vessel rising from docks seconds later. And as the stars stretched into lines and the system fell away behind her, she felt no thrill, no vengeance, just a quiet, unrelenting need to understand why they had been forced to become monsters in turn. Because the next time someone fired on Earth's rescuers, there would be no hesitation, only fire. The void between stars was quiet, too quiet. It was a kind of silence Mira had once cherished during long survey missions, a space to think, to plan, to breathe. But aboard the Argent Warden, hurtling toward an enemy that still hadn't spoken a word. The silence now felt oppressive, like a breath held too long. The fleet had been en route for 5 days when they found the first sign. A derelict Varn vessel drifted at the edge of the Nepho's belt, just outside the reach of any known hyperlanes. It hadn't been destroyed. There were no signs of battle. Its systems were offline, its hull intact, its lights dead. Mira stared at the structure from the command deck as the Warden slowly approached, flanked by 2 corvettes. The ship was massive, longer than a Terran dreadnought, shaped like a blade with its tip sheared at a brutal angle. It bore no insignia, no markings, just that same obsidian alloy that absorbed light like a black hole, a grave floating in the dark. "Life signs?" she asked. "None," Rico replied. "No thermal readings. Environmental systems are inert." Mira narrowed her eyes. Could be a trap or a message. "I'll prep the boarding team," he said, but she raised a hand. "I'm going." He blinked. "Captain, that's not. Protocol doesn't cover this. I want eyes on it myself." The boarding pod latched onto the alien hull with a magnetic grip. Mira stepped out into a corridor that seemed more like a tunnel carved from volcanic glass than a passage. The walls shimmered faintly with blue veins, remnants of a power grid perhaps, but they pulsed erratically, like a dying heartbeat. The air was cold and dry, her breath fog in the helmet. The boarding team fanned out, weapons ready. Mira led them forward, down the curved spine of the ship, past what looked like empty alcoves or berthing pods. Some were open, others were sealed with a translucent resin. Clouded from within, Dr. Eluin Park's voice crackled in through the comm. He was patched in from the Warden's lab deck. "Captain, we're running preliminary scans. The alloy on this ship isn't listed in any known registry. It's semi-organic. There are traces of protein structures bonded to the hull. Living metal?" she muttered. "Possibly once. But now it's dormant." They reached what might have been a command center. No chairs. No displays. Just a raised platform surrounded by rings of sloped metal. In the center, a crystalline sphere sat mounted in a nest of cables, like a frozen star. Mira approached it slowly. "Captain, it's emitting a low-frequency signal." Park's voice came again. Passive. Not harmful, but it's on repeat. Mira touched the sphere. A shock jolted her fingertips. She recoiled, then froze as a whisper filled her ears. Not through the comm, through the helmet itself. A voice without language. Emotion without words. Fear. It wasn't her own. She stepped back. "Get us out," she said quietly. "Now." They returned to the Warden with no resistance. No alarms. The Varn ship remained inert, but Mira couldn't shake what she felt. A presence that wasn't quite gone. Something had died on that ship, yes, but something else had left a mark. By the time the fleet reconvened, Rourke had arrived with the second battle group. He demanded answers. Mira presented the data herself in the Fleet Council chamber, a wide, circular space with transparent walls looking out into the cosmos. The other captains listened as she described the vessel, the voice, the residual signals that were still being analyzed. "You think they were running?" Rourke asked at last. "I think they were hunted," Mira replied, "and not by us." He tapped his fingers against the table. "We came for revenge, not ghosts." "They didn't resist," she said. "They could have fought at Garan, 3, and held the field, but they retreated. Even the ships that followed us broke off. It's like they were testing our reaction. Or baiting it." Mira nodded slowly, which raises a question. Who benefits if we go to war with a dying empire? Silence fell. Commander VS leaned forward. "There's a theory gaining traction in the science deck. The Varn aren't just nomadic. They might be fleeing something. Their text suggests a civilization in decline. Advanced, yes, but fracturing. Something's driving them forward. And they attacked the convoy because..." Draven asked, skeptical. "Because they thought we were the threat?" Mira finished. "Or they needed to send a message to someone else." Rourke stood. His eyes were on the stars now. "Then we need to find out what's chasing them." Within hours, the mission parameters shifted. Instead of direct assault, The fleet split into reconnaissance phalanxes. The warden was assigned to deep mapping a sector tagged Varn Echo 7, an area of uncharted space recently traversed by one of the fleeing enemy vessels. They arrived 2 days later. What they found wasn't a fleet. It was a graveyard. Hundreds of ships. Varn human. Other configurations Mira didn't recognize. All drifting, torn apart. Some split down the middle with surgical precision. Others fused into twisted wreckage like something had melted them mid-escape. No power, no signals, just the cold stillness of annihilation. Rico whispered, "This wasn't a battle." "No," Mira agreed, her voice hushed. "This was an execution." Aboard one of the wrecks, the science team recovered fragments of data. Encrypted, partial, but something stood out. A repeating glyph in the Varn language, burned into metal, carved into walls, etched into bone. Mira stared at it for a long time. She didn't recognize the language, but she understood the pattern. A warning, a predator symbol. Rourke's face appeared in a private channel. "We confirmed similar wrecks in Echo 2 and Delta 14. This isn't isolated. Something's hunting across multiple sectors," Mira said. "Not just Varn. Everything. And if we're next, then we need allies," she replied. "Even the ones we plan to destroy." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "Make contact. Find out if the Varn are willing to talk." She raised an eyebrow. "And if they're not, then we pray the enemy behind them never finds Earth." The rendezvous was set in a binary system called Veldelos, just outside contested Varn space, a neutral grave of light and rock where no one had claimed dominion in generations. It wasn't marked on human star charts. The Varn had sent coordinates in the form of quantum pulses piggybacked on a decaying beacon, buried deep in a debris field near the wrecks. That they chose to answer it all was unexpected. That they offered terms, even more so. Mira stood alone in the diplomatic bay of the Argent Warden, her breath tight with a mix of tension and unease. Around her, the chamber was stripped of weapons, surveillance, even armor plating. A single transparent dome overhead revealed the twin stars beyond, one blue and one crimson, casting their eerie dance of shadows across the polished floor. The Varn ship appeared with no warning. 1 second space was empty. The next, it bloomed from folded light, like a predator surfacing from black water. Smaller than expected and wounded, scar tissue of battle scorched its surface in curling ridges. But it moved with purpose, silent and deliberate. No escort, no weapons raised. They were here to talk. The Varn delegate emerged from the umbilical corridor without ceremony. It was taller than any human, slender in a way that suggested a different evolution of bone and purpose. Its armor was part of its skin, iridescent and flowing like oil on water. Its face was a mask of shifting geometry, yet 2 eyes, deep coal dark, settled on Mira with intelligent stillness. She didn't speak first. Neither did it. Finally, the voice came, not through speakers or air, but inside her thoughts, sculpted with weight and nuance. "You returned the cry." Mira nodded slowly. "You fired on a rescue convoy. You brought this war. We did not choose that death. We were pursued. Our passage was forbidden. You stood in our path. We grieve it." The voice was not emotionless. It trembled with something older than guilt, an exhaustion, maybe, or fear carried for too long. Mira stepped closer. "We thought you were the threat. Now we're not so sure." The Varn's head tilted slightly, as if that shift in understanding hurt more than hostility. "You see the bones, but not the blade." "Then show us," Mira said. "If there's something worse out here, we need to know." The Varn gestured, and a spherical device rose from its side. Holograms unfurled in the air like petals of fire. Scenes Mira had no reference for. Cities that weren't cities. Structures folding into non-Euclidean spirals. Beings without form, streaking across star systems like data traveling through glass. And everywhere, silence, followed by obliteration. They come for what they cannot speak. They feed not on us, but on memory, on pattern and intention. We call them the Hollow. The word echoed with a shiver. Not a name, but a verdict. Mira reached for the console, capturing the images, running them through the translator core. Fragmented, unresolvable, like trying to record a nightmare. Why us, she asked. Why Earth? We've barely touched your borders. Because you shine. The Varn stepped closer. Bright minds. Loud signals. The hollow are drawn to noise. You built fire into the sky and shouted into the dark. They heard. Mira swallowed hard. Then we have to stop them. The Varn's eyes dimmed slightly. We tried, for 1,000 cycles. We failed, so we ran. Rourke's voice entered her ear through a private comm. We've seen enough. If they're telling the truth, this is bigger than a war. This is extinction. And if they're lying, then we kill them and prepare to face the hollow anyway. Mira muted the channel. She turned back to the Varn. We need to work together, she said. You know them. We have the numbers, the industry. We don't have to die alone. The Varn paused. Then, with a slow movement, it pressed 2 fingers to its chest. The armor there split open, not flesh beneath, but a lattice of dark crystal pulsing weakly. A piece detached and floated toward Mira. Then you will see what we see. Share our memory. It drifted toward her like a falling star. She hesitated, then reached out. Pain bloomed, not physical, not sharp. It was the ache of remembrance, not her own. Flashes of civilizations burning, whole species vanishing between one breath and the next. And something watching from the edge, the hollow, formless and vast, not life as she understood it, but entropy given sentience. She staggered back. The Varn caught her, not with hands, but with thought, steadying her mind. Now you understand. She did, and she was terrified. Later, as the Varn departed, Mira stood in the observation bay with Rourke beside her. He hadn't spoken since she shared the memory crystal, with fleet command. His expression was unreadable. Well, she asked. He sighed. We're calling an emergency council. A vote for full interspecies alignment. Varn, Centauri, the Mars separatists. Anyone who still breathes. Mira nodded. And after that, we build. For war? He shook his head. For survival. She turned to face him. Do you believe them? Rourke looked out at the stars, jaw tight. I believe we're not the top of the food chain anymore. The next weeks moved like a storm. Earth's most bitter enemies became reluctant allies. Varn emissaries shared patterns of void disruption, blueprints of arc-reactive weapons that could collapse hollow entry points. Human scientists began testing dark light pulses, energy coated with chaos, the only thing the hollow had shown aversion to. Fleet Command consolidated every ship that could fly. The Sol Defense Network was restructured into the pan-species contingent. Mira was elevated to command liaison, her knowledge of both rescue protocol and Varn behavior making her one of few who could bridge the trust gap. But in her quiet hours, she stared at the crystal in her quarters, watching its soft pulses. She dreamed now of hollow spaces, of flickers in the dark that learned the shape of your thoughts and hollowed them out like driftwood. One night, she heard a whisper that wasn't hers. Not Varn, not human. A warning. When light burns too long, it draws the dark. She didn't sleep after that. The final chapter was not a declaration. It was a whisper across frequencies, sent to all known civilizations. A message of unity, or surrender. They fired on a rescue convoy, and Earth went to war without hesitation. But now, we must become more than warriors. We must become the beacon, or the last scream before the stars go silent. And so, beneath the red light of a dying sun, the last fleet of the old era turned to face the dark. Together,